Hi, Arnita.
Am I?
And we are recording.
All right, well, happy Tuesday to everyone during our unprecedented time during this COVID-19 mess that we have going on. This is a Language of Healing discussion group, and we are discussing today Chapter 3, entitled, Pardon Me, Your Tribe is Showing. What a great title, by the way. Love that title. And we are going to start for the first 15 minutes or so by talking to our authors, Wayne Jacobson, Arnita Taylor, and Bob Prater, and we're going to have a little discussion with them. And then the rest of the panelists, feel free to jump in. I'll have some specific questions for the authors, and then I'll have some more general questions, hoping to spark some discussion. So I'm glad all of you beautiful people are here today. And I am Nancy Routzon, and I am a 7th grade English teacher in Arlington, Texas, and glad to be here today. So this chapter is on the idea of tribes, the idea that we each find our own group somehow, our own place where we fit, various ways that we do that, and the idea that tribes can how the tribes interact with each other and how we interact within our tribes and with those from other tribes. And so I'm going to start by asking our authors to do a quick little introduction about their own tribes. How would you describe your tribe, Bob, Arnita, and Wayne? And how do you think that tribe formed?
My tribe is it's fluid, but it's mostly, older white guys, older white people. We kind of drift towards the people that are like us, and my tribe has certainly been the evangelical church for almost all of my adult life. I don't know what the others might say, but that's where I've been.
I think I have a number of different tribes. I obviously have the heritage tribes I've been part of. I'm part of the faith groups I've been part of. And now a big part of people I relate to are folks that are kind of blown out on organized religion and yet still seeking a passionate relationship with God. So that's a lot of people I commune with. But I think it gets broader than that too. As I get older, I'm losing my sense of being in a specific tribe that's identified by those things and finding better ways to relate to people across the board.
Arnita, what about you?
I would probably echo that. I have lots of tribes. There are some that I'm very, very attached to, others that I'm not. And it's a fluid process. It depends how I tend to identify on a day. I've been part of a faith community. I'm part of a scientific community, which, is really sexy right now. So lots of different tribes. I'm African American, I'm female, lots of different tribes. So it's fluid for me as well.
Well, wait a minute. You said scientific tribe, which is sexy right about now, unless your name is Dr. Fauci, and then maybe not so much.
You know what? We're going to need to keep going, Nancy.
You had to go there, Bob. We're going to move right on past that one. Okay. Wayne, I'm just speaking of, since we're just going to jump right in and dive in head first here. Wayne, sure. I'm going to start with a question for you. Okay. You make a statement in the book that our nation was founded on ideals that transcend race or transcend tribalism. And then in the very next paragraph, you start with this statement. So the nation was founded on the ideals that transcend tribalism. The next paragraph says, unfortunately, they only saw that in terms of European culture and religious faith. So how have these ideals evolved, or have they?
Oh, I think they have. Not near as far as they need to go. The ideal was all people are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. That's the ideal. The practicality of it at that time and age, unfortunately, they really meant men, and they really meant white, and they really meant things that we have over the course of the last 240 years tried to work our way out of. too slowly, not fast enough. The ideal stand, just like, you know, and I'm committed to lose weight for 40 years and never lost a pound. The ideal is one thing, the practicality is another. And they were fatally flawed in the practicality of how that works. But for the time to make a statement like all people are created equal at a time when royalty had bearing over commoners and people were subservient to various other situations, it was amazing language at a time when the world needed it, but the world has not yet caught up to that language.
So you're saying that the European colonialism sort of replaced a, how would you say it, a colonizer system, where you had the king and the hierarchy there, and then so we sort of transferred that. Do you see that there is, so we were trying to escape from an oppressive tribalism? So
certainly. Mostly people who came to the New World were trying to get away from something oppressive in the former. Yeah.
So would you see that there has been a transfer of that sort of idea, that there's still an authoritative, oppressive tribe in our country now?
You hope not. But I think the practicality, again, the difference between our practicality and our deals, I think we're making tremendous progress. At the same time, it's not fast enough for those who are on the other side of that, who don't have equal rights, who don't have equal opportunity, who are not regarded as having inalienable rights to the pursuit of happiness and those things. So yeah, I think we have it. Unfortunately, a lot of that's not necessarily driven by race. Some of it is for sure, but some of it's also driven by economic models that a consumeristic society goes after the dollar wherever they find it. And I find it oppressive sometimes in terms of how we use sex to sell products. So it's not just a racial thing. Oppression comes in many forms. And most of it's coming just because somebody's chasing the buck. That's why we've lost our media, I think, in these days, because of clicks and because of those things. The truth in the media doesn't matter much anymore so there's lots of ways oppression is expressed in our society by people who have money and people who have power to force their will on other people.
So it's another form of tribe. There's another tribe, and it may not be a racial tribe. It may be a wealthy tribe.
It may be an elitist tribe, certainly.
Elitist. That's a good way to put that, yes. And to make a bit of a leap here in this particular circle, and Ahmad, I want to hear your perspective later, but most of us, I believe, have come out of the evangelical tradition. And one of the things you guys talk about in the book is this idea of tribalism in churches. And Bob, I want to ask you a question about that. You mentioned blind loyalty in churches. Can you say a little bit more about that? What does that mean?
Absolutely. And by the way, not much of a leap here, because Wayne just mentioned elitism, and the church, the evangelical church, is a breeding ground to teach us that we have something that other people don't have. And so there is this sense of elite. Especially, you know, as you go further and further in the faith, now there's people below you. The ladder is everywhere. There's not just a business ladder, but there is a religious ladder as well. So, but beyond that, the blind loyalty, we're seeing it in real time with the politicization, political ascent of the church starting in the 1970s. With the moral majority, now they call it the silent majority, whatever it may be. But the true meaning is people who look like me. So when we are then told point blank how we should believe, how we should vote, and how we should even spend our money. I mean, I mean, we talk about cancel culture today. And my gosh, the evangelical church invented cancel culture. Are you serious? Remember the things of boycotting Disneyland or yes, Harry Potter or whatever the case may be. We are the kings of cancel culture, and yet we're yelling the loudest right now. You can't. Cancel culture is wrong. But when you've got leaders standing in a pulpit or leaders looking at a TV camera, telling their followers X, Y, and Z. Arnita, you're there in Dallas. I think about what Robert Jeffress did a couple of weeks ago with Mike Pence. There's an example to me of blind loyalty to a party and to an ideology. Come hell or high water, we're going to go for it, and we're going to encourage people to come along.
So do you think with that development, so that you're describing a tribe with a very authoritarian structure, do you think that there's a way for churches to undo that or
Sure.
get out of that? Or what are some ways that we as the church could change that?
Yeah, Nancy, that is 100% possible. I'm the guy that walks on this earth thinking that things are not completely set in stone. Even people, look at the book of Revelation or the book of Daniel or the book of whatever, and they say, this has got to happen. And now this, and this. I'm not that guy. I always hold out hope that things are going to get better. I believe that God loves us, and that it is an incredible love that transcends anything we can imagine. So with that in play, of course, but it takes a shift in heart. It takes a shift in the way we do business. It takes a shift in operation. And most of all, we've got to allow other voices to sit down at the table with us. We have to. We cannot do business as usual.
So, segue into my next question here. Arnita, structures, leadership will come to the surface, right? Even when we have structures that say, we're not going to have a leader. We've seen that in some church movements and stuff, but there will be leaders, right? And you talk about loyalty being important in a tribe, then some loyalty to the leader. What does loyalty to a leader mean to you?
Well, I think actually in the book, I'm kind of saying loyalty to a tribe, to a fault, is not good.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying for me is when I lead, I do not expect blind loyalty from people on my team. Loyalty to me as a leader means commitment. It means that you're consistent, that you offer solutions, that you're there. It never means to me that you never disagree with me. That is not what loyalty is. And so when you start to have to examine tribalism and what your original tribes taught you, if you have blind loyalty, it's going to be really frustrating for you. You're probably going to start to need a vice to have to deal with it, because it's going to be very, very difficult if blind loyalty is the way you have been taught to think and where your paradigm goes immediately. So I'm just saying, when we're looking at crossing over to other tribes to become more humane in how we deal with people, blind loyalty is something that you will have to wrestle with.
Right.
So with what you're saying there, loyalty could actually include some things that we seem to be uncomfortable with: confrontation, questioning, pushback, things that we seem to be uncomfortable with.
It must include that. It must include
that. Yes. I'm going to follow up with a question to you, Arnita. You make the statement, if you are part of the marginalized people in the country, tribalism may be your way to survive. How can those from outside the tribe, perhaps those from what we might call the oppressive tribe, begin to make inroads while not perpetuating the oppression?
Well, they'll need to do that very carefully if they are even able to do that. To answer your question directly, I don't know that everyone has the desire to do so. Some people have been so oppressive, and it's just indigenous to who they are. So they don't even know when they come towards someone different that they're still being oppressive. And that can be sexism, racism, lots of isms. I could go down through there on that. So when you are going toward a tribe that's unknown for you, one, I would say listen to them. If they say, hey, that's out of bounds, it's out of bounds. You shouldn't have to go get that from a third party when I'm telling you right here in your face. So it just depends how ready you are to really address your own oppression and what you bring to the other tribe. So
that kind of goes back to your discussion of blind loyalty to the tribe. If you're blindly loyal to one tribe, you're not going to be terribly interested in what another one has to say or what another one is doing. So,
Or you just make it fake, or you just make it not true because it didn't affect you. And then that's the best definition of privilege. If it doesn't affect me, it's not that big of a deal. It's all right. It's good. Come see, come stop. That's how you know when people are still operating oppressively across tribes.
Ooh, might need to sit on that one for a second. Wow.
Yeah, I need to say Selah on that myself. That was good.
Yes, that was good right there. That'll preach right there.
Yeah, it will.
Whew. So speaking of moving from tribe to tribe, Bob, how do we deal with the dynamic of political power and political tribalism? Is it a necessary evil in our system?
Yeah, is it? I don't despise politics. I happen to, but at the same time, I sort of do. I think that government comes from heaven. I think politics is the way that we try to form our government. I don't think that was ever really the way that we were meant to live. And anytime we get into the political realm, there's always going to be corruption. Now, when the church began to hold hands politically with government leaders and politicians, we've seen the slide. We've seen the slide, and it's literally gone on forever. But in my lifetime, I can go back to that thing with Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, and folks of that ilk back in the 1970s, where they began to stand and mobilize Christians to vote as a bloc. Can it be undone? Of course it can. Of course it can. But it takes an act of our will, and it takes, people like us to stand up and say, hey, there's got to be a different way.
Yeah. And one of the things you mention in the book is the sort of partnership between politics and evangelicalism. Okay. And tell us what you mean by evangelicalism. What does that mean?
Yeah, evangelicalism, it doesn't mean what it used to mean. It used to mean those who were Bible-believing Christians who believed in evangelizing the world. Evangelical comes from evangelizing, telling people the good news, the gospel. Right. Somewhere along the line, that has become a political term. I no longer identify as an evangelical. I did for years. But that is a term that I have had to walk away from, not because I still don't appreciate the term, because I really do. But it has become something that it didn't used to be.
How did it become that? How did that happen? I mean, you've mentioned some ties to the religious right and that kind of stuff. Dig a little more there.
Well, it's where we give people permission, literally, spiritually, to vilify people that are not like us, and then amplify people who are. So we happen to have a very prominent former Muslim leader in the room right now, my friend Ahmad Mirza. Christians are very subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, being taught to not just fear people like him, but to also hate them. It's like we're given permission. Like, yeah, God, there's a quote at the beginning of our book from Anne Lamott that says, if God hates all the same people that you do, you can pretty much guarantee that you've created God in your image rather than the other way around. And so that's what that's all about with me.
That'll push some buttons. Arnita, why do you think you've mentioned, you all three of you mentioned that your tribes can be fluid, right? And is part of that fluidity a willingness to examine the tribe? Have you found yourself needing, Bob, you mentioned that you used to consider yourself an evangelical. That would be a tribe. You don't anymore.
No.
So, when you're talking about these fluid tribes, is there any sense, Wayne, maybe jump in here, is there a sense in which some of that fluidity has been a willingness to examine your tribe?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's helpful to see not only the value that a tribe can bring you, but also the blindness that it can invoke on you. You ask, where did evangelicalism become a more political term? truthfully, it happened in the mid 60s when Christians started feeling oppressed by the secularism of society. Take prayer out of schools, do some of those things. Now they feel like an oppressed group, and oppressed groups, like Arnita says, it's easy to gather as a tribe. We're right. We're going to fight for what we want and come out with guns blazing. I think for me, the more I get into people's humanity and the more intrigued I am by people's stories, I don't need people to agree with me as much for my own confidence and solidarity and how I live. So I can be more generous to let other people in and access. And the point of the chapter about, your tribe is showing is if you just navigate society worried about your tribe, you're a threat to democracy. The whole dream of democracy, a democratic republic, is that people of diverse views can live together in peace and share the platforms of power. Share it. Now, that's the goal. We're not doing it well because both our political parties are hell-bent on our power over their power. We're the good, they're the evil in society. And all that language is what's fracturing us and keeping us from finding real solutions to the problems we need to deal with.
Tribalism at its finest.
And it's
or
worst.
At its worst, yeah, at its basest. Arnita, why do you think people are unwilling to examine their tribes?
Some people don't have to. Quite simply, they don't have to. If you're white in America, you really don't have to examine them real hard if you don't want to. You can do a whole life without different people in your life, and I'm very clear about that in the book. I think other people don't have the emotional intelligence to do it. It just breaks them down. I mean, there's a little book out there called White Fragility that's shocking the world, and people just cannot handle that what they've been taught. They have to unlearn and unfreeze a lot of what they have believed. Their values have to change in the way they're expressing them. That is very hard work. Most people can't be honest enough with themselves to go and do that type of work. Is it possible? Yes. But normally I find there has to be a personal reason that you want to do that. There has to be some buy-in and some benefit for you to really take as an act of your will to go toward a different tribe. I believe that wholeheartedly. It has to be desire. It's more than awareness. It's awareness and desire, and then knowledge, and then going toward it. It's more than one aspect to it. And I just don't think it means that much. It's not a priority for most people, a lot of people. So that's why I think it's hard.
Is there a way for those of us that are really interested in a language of healing, for those of us that are really interested in moving that needle, is there a way to maybe inch that needle a little further? Is there a way that we can do that? How do we do that?
The first thing you do is you go find a friend in the other tribe and you sit down and you have a conversation. You can read 15 books. I'm all for them. Mm-hmm. Go buy 15,000 of ours and keep reading them. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to sit down with someone in the other tribe and have a conversation. What does it take for you to really do that? It takes a whole lot of stuff at the same time. It takes risk. It takes risk of fear and rejection and a lot of things. But you still have to sit down opposite someone in order to tear down your tribe. And you'll find a lot more humanity and a lot more commonness if you can do that. But as long as they're in the out group, then it's just very difficult for people to go toward that unless they need it for something.
Unless it gets uncomfortable, most of us don't like to change.
Right. Change. Most people in the world don't like change. I'm a coach, and the first thing I do is I try to determine someone's change quotient. If I see you have a low change quotient, there's no need in me and you talking, because you're not going to go toward it. We're very clear in the language of healing. This conversation won't be for everyone. We know what it's going to take for you to be able to go do this. We know that's hard. Wayne and Bob and I, we disagreed on a lot. So we know it's hard.
What?
Really? Bob, you look so shocked.
I know. I didn't. This is news to me.
Now, it's always the one that starts stuff to talk first. Y'all know that, right?
Oh, okay.
Well, on that note,
moving along.
Moving right along. I love the way you guys are defining tribe here. So I'm going to open it up to the rest of the panel here and ask you guys, just like we heard our authors a few minutes ago, to describe their tribes, and how did those form? How would you describe that? Do you have one that you primarily identify with? Do you have more than one? How does that work for you?
I am Korea, and I'm in Richmond, Virginia. For me, my tribe has been my family, and a lot of that has been because of COVID. I'm also an introverted person, so I find myself kind of becoming more of a tribal one, but I'm interested more and more to connect with other people who don't look like me, who don't have the same beliefs and views as me. So I would say I'm fluid in that respect.
Hi, I'm Christy Robinson. I'm from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I have many tribes because I have my family that I'm very close-knit with. Then I have a very close group of friends that I get together with, and we share life. Educators, social groups, church groups. So I have a lot of tribes. People move in and out of some of those tribes sometimes, but for the most part, my main tribe has been my main tribe for over 20 years. So that tribe has remained constant.
Maud, Tyler, what about you guys?
Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, my name's Tyler Hartford. I'm in Goshen, Indiana, near South Bend, Indiana. I have been thinking a lot about, I think my tribe changes every few years. This is the longest I've kind of been in one grouping, but I'm originally from Maine. And so dislocating myself from my family and moving around the country, mainly Midwest, has put me in different places, urban, suburban. Now I'm kind of semi-rural. I would be from a non-Christian background, marginal Catholic, was in the fundamentalist Jerry Falwell group, Moral Majority, through my formative years. Now I'm in an Anabaptist church, which would be connected to a Mennonite peace-focused group. So, and that's a heavily ethnic tribe. So I'm part of that tribe, but I'm not really. Like, I live here and I'm always being reminded that my last name doesn't fit a Swiss-German framework. So I find that I'm always trying to define my tribe. I guess right now it's a lot of people who look like me and have some evangelical leanings, but it's been an interesting journey.
Thanks, Tyler.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ahmad Mirza. Bob's introduced me. Yeah, for me, Bismillah, in the name of God, for me, it was interesting. I think I had no choice in the matter. From early on, I found myself uprooted from my home in Kuwait, Middle East, and brought to America. And there was just no, I didn't relate to any tribe. I just needed to intermix with most of my white friends, conservative friends, and whatnot. But moreover, I wasn't able to adhere to any kind of tribal thought. Had I been Kuwait, I would have. But then the first 30 years, I had no choice in the matter. The last 25 years, as I got to know my faith very well, I realized that, we have an X on tribalism in Islam. They're just something you don't do. You don't go back. That's kind of the disease that they had in Muhammad's day, peace be upon him, is that folks felt they were better because they were Arab, or they were this or they were that, and Islam came and literally obliterated that. I think I've shared a story online where there was a couple companions that had an argument. One was a noble Arab and the other one was a ex-African slave, one of the best Muslims ever existed. And the noble Arab got angry and said to him, you son of an African slave. The other companions heard this and went to the Prophet and told him, and the Prophet grew angry. He said, Da'oha. Da'oha means they called back to it. They called back to the days of ignorance. We call it a jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah, it wasn't just about paganism, it was about pride in tribe, pride in ethnicity, pride in race, okay? For the Prophet said they called back to it. So when Abu Dhar, the one who called back to it, the one who called his brother the son of an African slave, heard this, he went to the ex-African slave, his brother Bilal, and he said, I wronged you and wronged myself. And if you do not, I'm going to put my head on the ground, on the dirt. And if you don't step on my head, I will not be able to redeem myself from my mistake. In front of everyone, I need you to stomp on my head. His brother, of course, Bilal, one of our heroes and beloved Muslims, said, you are my brother and I forgive you. We just don't have a choice as Muslims to look at tribalism anyway. Even our family, if you become tribal with your family, you have committed a sin and gone against Islam. But for me, as a Muslim and an Arab, I was very blessed. It's one of my singular blessings. Bob knows this, that I was forced out of any tribal thought. Trust me, we have tribalism in Islam and in the Middle East. And I just was blessed not to have it. And so I teach my children all the time, we don't see color, we don't see race, we don't see ethnicity. We don't have pride in our family, tribe. I have pride, or I have loyalty to one thing, and that is anything that is nobly good. When I mean noble, I mean truth, justice, fairness, kindness, compassion, honesty, integrity, faith in God, and so on and so forth. That's all I can be loyal to. That's all I can be proud of.
So do you think, and I want to open this up to the rest of the panel too, do you think that's an interesting point you brought up, Ahmad, that the idea would be that tribes are inherently bad isn't the right word, but maybe that is the right word, that there's an inherent danger in tribalism?
There is, in leading my community, one of the groups that I dealt with quite a bit is because a lot of African Americans become Muslim and, come into the fold. And the first thing I would work to root them out of is that don't look at your color and don't look at the oppression of your color. You're not oppressed. Those that oppress you are the ones that are oppressed. They oppress themselves by oppressing you. They're misguided. Maybe on earth, yes, they're going to take things away from you, but with God, they are completely at odds with their Lord. You need to just embrace your faith and embrace that you're just as good as me. You could be better than me. You could be worse than me. You choose that. And so it wasn't that I didn't understand. I very much understand the struggle of African Americans in this country going back 400 years. And the most hateful time for me is just 50 years ago. I just cannot stand looking at what happened to African Americans. But I think they can transcend that by moving into another plane of existence and looking at the others as the ones who are oppressed, in the sense that they don't realize how much they're oppressing their own souls and believing they're better than somebody because of the color of their skin. Moreover, we consider the original sin. The first sin was committed by Satan against God. And the way he did that was through pride and arrogance, because he said to God, when God commanded him to prostrate to Adam, he said, you have created me from the flame of the fire, and you've created him from clay or dirt. I am better than him. And so God knew that he had this arrogance in his heart. And the prophet told us that an ounce or an atom's weight of arrogance in the heart destroys your faith. And so I fear that more than anything, that I would have pride in anything other than my righteousness or in what the righteousness that God had guided me to. And that's even, you have to be careful. You have to be careful. So in Islam, and as a Muslim, and as a man, and as a father, as a husband, as a whatever, a son, a neighbor, my biggest fear is to have arrogance in any way, pride in any way, that is in anything that I should just be thankful for and I should be humble for.
Let me throw that out to the rest of the panel. What do you guys think about that? That's a lot that Ahmad's just given us to think about. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? Arnita, you were thinking over there. What are you thinking?
Different perspectives, different backgrounds. I think there is a positive and a negative expression of tribe, just like any emotion can have a negative and a positive expression. If I'm an inner city kid and I'm in a gang, my tribe is the best thing in the world to me. It gives me belonging and connection and survival and food and love. It gives me all those things. But then again, in speaking a language of healing, I want to make sure we keep it in context. Deeply, deeply adhering to tribe, as Ahmad is saying, is not going to help you promote going toward different people. And that's kind of where the conversation goes in the book. If you cannot shake any part of your arrogance and elitism as in your superiority and all of that as a race or a culture or a group, it's going to be very hard for you to go toward people who are different than you. Very, very difficult. very difficult.
And I would echo what you said, Arnita. There's certainly positive effects of tribalism, safety, acceptance, all of those things. I've been reading Erik Erikson, who was a psychoanalyst from the turn of the century, from as we got into the 1900s, and he talked about the 8 stages of life, and by the time you're 35, you've experienced the first 6, but stage 7, from 35 to 65, he defines it as 2 choices: stagnation or generativity. And generativity means to, of course, generate and move forward. And then at the end, 65 and on, it's 2 choices again. It's integrity or despair. And so I know so many in my generation that have chosen stagnation. We know everything. Don't tell us. I already know what I believe. Leave me alone. I already have my friends. Leave me alone. I don't need new friends. I already have some. It's so important, I think, for us, especially me, as I head towards that over 65, and I want to live a life of integrity at the end. I want to be that old guy that young people seek out. That's been my goal for a long time. But I'm not going to get there if I'm stagnant. And oh, Siri just told me she's here if I want to talk. So that's always good to know.
Bob, I'm here. Don't worry.
No worries.
So
that ability to move forward and to still generate and learn, even as we're older, is absolutely imperative. Otherwise, we become those people that stand out on our front porch and say, "Hey, kids, get off my lawn."
So think about, I want to throw this out to, Tyler, tell me what you think about it. Can you describe a time you learned from somebody outside your tribe?
Sure, I'll give you an example. I already mentioned that I serve as a minister in an Anabaptist setting, and that tends to be more of an ethnic grouping. There are aspects of how I'm wired where I like to be really wide, but being a pastor of a local congregation can be really difficult to navigate. There's a fairly narrow definition at times of who's in the tribe. So there's different ways I work with that within the congregation. I have an example would be I have a dear friend, young woman from Tupelo, Mississippi, gifted musician. My training is in the arts, so I invited her to come in and help us in a time of being a worship leader by being an interim, I call it a worship leader in residence. So her coming into our context, predominantly white, she comes out of a predominantly Black community, had wanted the opportunity to serve in the North in a white community. So I just created this safe situation. Here's a worship leader in residence. There were a lot of really awkward moments of trying to navigate staff sometimes when I would say something and not even realize I'd triggered something in her, or she would say something and I'd missed the cue. That was just so powerful, but just allowing someone to come in like that was a safe person that wanted that experience, did a lot for me. It deepened our friendship. Anita and Christy, I love the whole definition of whether or not you're really sisters. Like we call each other sister and brother. And to me, that means a lot, knowing the culture she comes from. I think one of the moments it was when I realized we're on a really good journey for the 6 months we were together was I was in a Hispanic, we have just 7 to 10 miles from our church, the population shifts to about 50% Latino. And so there's some really great restaurants. We're sitting there outside in the cafe, and I said, and I just started getting emotional. I said, you realize my parents, your parents' generation, we would not have been able to do this.
Yeah.
And I hope she gets to see this recording. We had an amazing time talking where her own family was telling her, you really shouldn't go up to the north. It's a dangerous place. Like, should you be carrying a weapon? Should you, like, and here I'm being told by my tribe, don't go to Tupelo and don't, you see what I'm saying? And we're sitting here in a Hispanic restaurant saying,
we're doing
a
this.
lot of movement has happened, and that's my hope. I feel like the last few months feels like people are in stress and they're withdrawing into their little tribal groups. but I really want to see more of that kind of movement. And I'll say my congregation, if anyone's watching it, they can all agree, we became very close. It's been a powerful experience.
Dr. Robinson, what about you? When's the time you've learned from someone outside?
Well, leading teachers, you learn a lot. You know, as an educator, I like to feel like I learn a lot all the time. But leading millennials, I have learned quite a bit, because I'll have to say I am very conservative in some thoughts, and I'm very tunneled with some thinking, and I know that about myself. So sometimes when they say things or they present things, I'm thinking like, what? This is not going to work, you know. But I have really learned over the last couple of years to really listen to what they have to say and let them implement. And I have learned so much from that age demographic, and it's unbelievable. I do think some of them are way, our way of thinking is so different, and it could be age, it could be upbringing. It's so many variables to that, but that is what I have absolutely working with young ladies and young men who are younger than I am, because I think I'm constantly learning from them. And it's not just technology, it's not just wording, it's just not fads or those type of things. They have a different perspective of life that is so refreshing sometimes, because we do get bogged down and we do get stagnant, and we get worried about things that they just sometimes like, you know what, it is what it is, and what happens, and you kind of learn to move on from that. So that is what I would like. That's probably me getting outside of my tribes, being with other people younger.
I'd love to sit in your trainings. Educator to educator. Korea, what about you?
Tim comes to mind. If you, he's someone who co-hosts our podcast with me and my husband. He's a middle-aged white guy, single, doesn't have children. And when we met, it was kind of funny. We were doing church services in a hotel conference room, and the room is near a bathroom, and other people would come into the room thinking it's the bathroom. So it's like, no, go down the hall. And here Tim comes, and show up. We always have this joke, like, he was looking for the bathroom, but he was coming to service. But he's been a great friend, and for many years, and he's witnessed us go through some really hard times. And just the fact that you have this guy, this white, middle-aged guy, single, no kids, and we've been friends for years and been able to connect in a lot of different ways. In a lot of ways, it helped me to feel more secure about myself, and that if I can have a friend like this, I can have other friends that don't look like me, or don't have the same experiences as me, and just giving me a different perspective on life. He definitely has done that. So Tim is a huge inspiration. We've told him many times, but yeah, definitely he's someone who definitely comes to mind.
Wayne, what about you?
Yeah, two of my biggest are in this room, Arnita and Ahmad, in terms of what they've allowed me to discuss with them and the way they've opened their lives. But I've been traveling for 25 years. When I travel, I stay in people's homes. I've been in countries all over the world. I mean, I look to learn something from everybody I hang out with, and usually do. And I've been in a lot of different cultural arrangements. And like I said, when I travel, I don't live in hotels. I live with people. And so I get the family experience. I get into the conversations that happen first thing in the morning or late at night. The key, I think, from people like Arnita and Ahmad is when you let somebody look behind the curtain, when you're not just presenting the image things that you have to present or feel like you have to present with your group, but actually without being easily offended, allowing people to ask questions, even questions that might be a little bit offensive or triggery, and they can just say, I'm not sure it's appropriate that you go there. And that's a benefit to me to know that. Or that comment, that could be taken a little bit inappropriately. that's been the value. And Ahmad has really given me a view inside the Islamic world I've not had before. And Arnita, we were talking about, and most people haven't read the introduction carefully. We met Arnita about 3 days before we started writing this book. And we weren't going to do a lot on race because two white guys aren't going to write about race. We're going to write politics, religion, those kinds of things. The first day we were with Arnita at a home of a mutual friend in Dallas, we got into just a conversation over breakfast about racial things that was just breathtaking in the fact that we could talk about it, laugh about it, and we weren't on eggshells and worried about somebody being offended by something. And we weren't trying to offend. We were just trying to learn together. And it was one of the most enriching times of my life. Yeah. Writing this whole book has been, and in these conversations, it's been that same thing.
It's been a pleasure for us too.
Wow. Wow, I would love to have been a fly on the wall.
No, you wouldn't, girl. No, you wouldn't.
Yes, I would.
Oh, she would have. I think she would have.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
so
I
too.
would have loved it.
Most people I
pretty
know
good.
would love to be in the conversations I get to be in, because I tell you, I learned so much. And it
You know what I
such a
really
texture.
want to say to back up Wayne and what everybody's saying? I think part of the value of going toward closer proximity to people who are different tribes is the nuance of it. There's so much you learn that you don't think you're gonna learn. It's not like you're there to check off a list. I need to learn 3 things from Tim, or I need to learn 3 things from Ahmad. It's the nuance. It's the nuance. It's something about sharing a meal. It's something about the intentionality of a conversation that you think is getting ready to go left. And somebody just kind of bust out laughing like, I can't believe you believe that. You know, it's the nuance of it. It's the nuance of it. Now that's what it was a good day when I would say that, okay? Let's keep it real.
It was.
But I think we need to know that there's so much more gray. You with the worship leader from Tupelo, Mississippi in Indiana in Amish country. That's special stuff. That you're gonna learn from each other just being in the same room, having simple conversations that you don't even think are a big deal, nothing scheduled. You learn. So I want people to understand the nuance of this. It doesn't have to be hard and overbearing, and it's just the nuance. Like, wow, I learned something. I didn't have 2 white men in my life that I talked to until it was Wayne and Bob. And I know thousands of people, but I don't talk about race and this kind of stuff with white men. Just don't. So everybody, we did this. You know, people read the book and go, wow, we love your conversation, but we kind of did it. We kind of didn't make it up. We did it. And so
you actually had the conversation.
we actually had the conversations. This
you.
is not a theory book. We did it. So the nuance is so important. I just didn't want to pass this moment.
No, and I think the nuance, I think that because humans are so nuanced, right? And that is the point. That is what we're after, is getting to each other's humanity, right? And understanding that the person sitting across from me is not, although they may identify with a tribe, they are not that tribe. Right. You know, there's a distinction there. Like, I can consider myself, like, I'm an educator. That's my tribe, as educators are my tribe. Deep down in me, that's not who I am. Right? There's so much more to my humanity than that. There's so much more nuance. And I think one of the things that starts to happen with these tribes is we get afraid of the unknown. And we're afraid to get out of our comfort zone and sit down with Arnita, in your case, 2 white guys, you know, Bob and Ahmad. I need to go listen to your podcast and hear your conversations, you know, because frankly, you know, I'm from New York. 9/11 was a big deal, you know, and the fear in the country precluded a lot of us from sitting down with Muslims to have a conversation. There was this fear that was perpetuated over and over. And so one of the things you guys talk about in the chapter is getting over your fear of the other. So how do we begin to, what are some things that we can do? What are some things that people who are reading and listening can do to start confronting that fear, wherever it comes from, whether it's been handed to us by the church or by the government or by the media or whatever? how do we begin to confront that fear and get through it?
Well, if we're going to be serious, Nancy, about breaking through that fear, then we literally just have to break through the fear. Sometimes you have to just take a step, even when it's scary, and step into the unknown and take a risk.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about. Ahmad and I we've taken some risks. I would say, Ahmad, that we have.
Yeah, I not to cut you off, Bob, but just following what Wayne and Arnita were saying about this one-on-one, getting into the people's lives, having them open the door for you. You and I both know, I think, we met each other at a time where we were not only dealing with community issues and whatnot, but we were meeting people one-on-one all the time. And for me as a Muslim leader and educator post 9/11, especially post 9/11, man, I just wanted people to sit with me, talk with me. I didn't care who you were. You could have been the head of, the Department of Justice, or you could have been the guy down the street, sweeping the streets, but you were afraid of me and I needed to talk to you. And I'll add this, there's a conservative pastor that reached out to me 2.5 years ago when I was abroad and said, hey, my community, they're having a problem. They're saying all these things about you guys, and I think we could sit together and do something about it and whatnot. And it took us sitting for 2 years together, meeting, discussing face-to-face, hours at a time, all these issues and breaking down all these issues before we did our first lecture debate just last February in front of the whole community, for us to really get to know each other on an intimate, like the way Wayne discusses, where we got to know each other's persons and families and issues and whatnot. It just broke down so much. And all it left for us was just the faith issues, just the theology and the law. And the personal issues just got, they were gone. There was no fear. There was no issue. There was nothing. The color wasn't an issue. The race wasn't an issue. And so I just agree with my friends, and me and Bob definitely, we've had very, very intimate firsthand experience in this, both with the community and with each other. And
Yeah,
I don't think there's any better than that.
There's no doubt. And the next thing, once we step through, like I did with Ahmad, I invited him to breakfast after a contentious interview at our local newspaper. And we become, when I say he's on this hand of friends in my life, he's on this hand. He's one of my 5 best friends on this earth, and he knows that. But that brings up proximity. You want to smash fear, you've got to be around people that are different than you, and maybe even people that you've been taught to be afraid of. That's the only way to dismantle fear, is to step into it.
And then you find that they're human.
I'd like to just share something very quickly. One of the things I do is I lead tours to Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and I use a tour company that uses usually Palestinian Christian guides and Muslim drivers. So many people who want to take a pilgrimage to Israel, Palestine, they go because they want to do a Christian pilgrimage. But what happens is we create an experience where they are with for 10 to 12 days, walking with a person who's a Christian Palestinian, is getting it from both angles, right? So when you watch a Jewish security officer profile your tour leader and take them off the bus for interrogation, you begin to enter in to what it must feel like to be an African American in certain settings in America. The conversation isn't easy to have one-to-one with a person about the white-black relationship. But then when you see that happen to a Palestinian Christian who, you share the faith, but wait, they're a different ethnicity. And so you see what I'm saying? So there's a mix-up that happens there. But one of the really cool things that happens is it's often a smaller group. So we go to people's homes. The experience of hospitality, I can tell you, there is nothing. I've been in Muslim homes and around Muslim people in several different countries. They have hospitality down to an art form. And if you get the chance to experience that, that just blows your brain as a white evangelical Christian. You know what I'm saying? And so actually in this time of COVID, we can't shake hands, right? Some people do, but so I introduced to my congregation a greeting that I've experienced in a couple of settings where I just say, it's an honor. It's an honor to be with you. And I just pat my hand over my heart. And I believe, Ahmad, like that is a Muslim greeting in many contexts.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And shaking hands and things like that. So it's kind of, in some cases, taboo in Islam, especially when it's male and female and whatnot. But,
so that's been a real blessing, and we've talked a lot about that in different settings. And I've seen people doing it. You know, just it's an honor. You know, it was a Zoom call and you can't shake hands. You know, hey, it's an honor. Great to be with you.
It's an honor for me too.
So there's just a couple of snapshots I wanted to kind of weave into what Ahmad was saying.
Korea, were you about to talk?
Yeah, I was going to say we're talking about making mention of food and having dinner. You learn a lot about people when you sit down and eat with them.
Amen.
And with Tim, we've learned a lot about him. He's learned a lot about us. And I think there's a level of security that one has to have in order to let their barriers down, because a lot of us we put our security and our identity and our beliefs and the traditions of others around us, our families.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one has, in order to begin to tackle that wall and to break down some of those barriers, you have to have some kind of security within yourself.
And eating is a vulnerable act. I thought you were going to weave that in. When you sit down and you break bread with people, that's a vulnerable act.
It's also a sacred act.
Yeah.
You know, eating is something sacred, something spiritual, more than it is physical, but it's something spiritual. When you're breaking bread with somebody, there's something sacred about that too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hey, go ahead, Wayne.
I would just say, to help too with your question, Nancy, one of the things that I think would help a lot of people is to realize how much we get from political leaders, from religious leaders, whatever, the fear of the other.
Yeah.
And so be critical when you read, when you're looking at a news report, whatever. I did this with my kids when they were younger. I said, tell me how this guy is using some other group to align you with him because we have a common enemy. And that is so overused, because humans are easier to exploit out of fear than anything else. And so it is used all the time, whether it's used. I had an old friend that I was in a conversation with today, and we're talking about the political climate of the country and some of the racial justice issues. He saw the whole thing in terms of good and evil. There was no ability to think outside. These people are trying to destroy the America we hold dear. And he was lost in the whole thing. And I kept trying to open him up, because he's been so inculcated into fear that now he can't see beyond it. Right. And it distorts every relationship he has with every other human being in his life. And that's sad to me.
That is sad.
Great point.
So for those of us, and just to wrap up, for those, you know, the Bible says perfect love casts out fear. So how do we love people? How do we love people? We start seeing them. We start seeing them not as the other, not as, well, you're part of that tribe, I can't talk to you, not as the media says I should be afraid of you, but we really start to love and love well. And
faith is good, but action is great. Good action.
It is.
Yes.
That's how you show people the way you act. You know?
What's the famous line too? There's nobody you wouldn't love if you heard their story. So where's it going to start? Listening to someone's story, because you'll care about them.
Stories. We start with stories, and we start with stepping outside of our comfort zone, outside of our tribes. It's okay to have our safe place where we're comfortable, and but getting out of that and sitting down at the table, breaking bread, being in proximity is how we further this conversation. It's how we learn to love. And I think
all three of us would want everybody to hear this, to see all of humanity as your in-group. That's the goal. We want you to see at some point all of humanity is your in-group. And if we can do that, you can have the other times, but at the end of the day, when humanity's hurting, we should all be hurting, no matter where it is. And so that's where we challenge you in this chapter on in-group and out-group dynamics. See humanity as your in-group. Listen to people, hear their stories, and just take some time to be compassionate.
Really good. That's a great concluding comment. I wanted to go there about the children of Adam, that the only real tribe factually and fundamentally is that we all come from Adam, Yep. And you just said it a whole nother way, and I couldn't agree with you more.
Yep.
I've tried to adapt a process in the internet. I want to be a presence on Facebook and other social media as a place of encouragement. I've been using the hashtag people are awesome quite a bit. You know, just find places to celebrate. Like, it doesn't take much to share something that's good. There's plenty out there that's tearing us apart, right? The difference is, like, let's try to celebrate how awesome people are.
And we should all be offended when somebody is harmed and oppressed. In this case, like the African-American community for so many years, we should all be offended. It should bother us all to our core. We should step into their shoes and feel the pain and understand it's real, and that we're forcing them into these corners and into these groupings, and we need to help them come back out. And it's on us. It's on us to show that we're not oppressive and that we're not unjust, and that we do actually feel the pain and relate.
Yes.
Personally, I want to be more inclusive in my life, and I want to understand more people, and to find ways to improve and to be more compassionate, to be more empathetic, and to be just a better community member.
I think the practice of trying to live within little tribes and have all humanity a tribe puts, in Christian language, a cruciform tension, where we find ourselves kind of in this place of tension. And I just wanted to note that even in my own context, in our setting, the debate around sexuality has created another whole layer of difficulty in the faith community. And that's been a very hard one for me to navigate. And it's cost a lot in the little tribe. But what I've tried to do on the end is to try to be celebrate the humanity of the wider group still, you know. And so you find yourself, as you're leading in a small local context like a church, you know, trying to hold that tension, hold that group together, but then also try to be wide enough that people don't threaten you, right? Like, humanity is humanity, and we all want the same things for our loved ones.
And that
that's just a crucial intention.
Yes, which brings it back to what Arnita said, which is all of humanity is our in-group.
There it is.
That's it.
Which doesn't mean we always agree. It just means we need to care. That's what it means.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It means we're all in this together. So
would you all permit me to make one Islamic point, if I could? The words rahma and rahim, and you can't cut either off. So rahma is compassion, empathy, feeling. Rahim is the womb from which you're born. So you cannot cut off the womb, the ties of the womb, which would be your family ties. You also cannot cut off rahim, which is your willingness to be compassionate and empathetic and feeling for other people. These are two things we cannot cut off. And this conversation, it just reminds me of that, as all of you are reiterating these points about tribe and then about compassion, empathy, and feeling. And they're definitely Islamic lessons that we've learned too.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. And just for the record, Christy and I really do share the same genetic makeup. We really are. We really are. We have the same gametes and zygotes and all that. So,
like, for real.
To clear that up.
That's great. This has been a great group.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Nice to meet
including
you
me.
all.
Bye,
Thanks for
y'all.
including me.
See you soon.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye,
Nancy.
everyone.
Bye.